Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Tonight's title is focused on something for a long time, I haven't had interest in speaking on, but recently the idea has approached me differently. And so I want to speak about intergalactic awareness, not through a sort of new age context, but through a sort of fast forwarding in history and realizing at some point the archetype of the individual that is, in some sense, you can say, defined by its local environment, it's going to begin being defined by non-local environments. What I mean by that is we have to begin wondering about the interaction of individual personas in confrontation of more complex understandings of galactic senses of being. So, what does that mean? That means we're creatures on a rock and we don't know what's going to happen, but we have a sense that we're here for a little while and we're existing through a sort of archetypal, there's a tent of archetypes, which I would call this civilization too. Of course, sometimes some of the titles of the talks are inspired out of a vision, and it's throughout I try to unravel and get to that vision. But the idea was that I began to wonder that if the archetypes become galactic, we would have access. So what would that mean? That would mean kind of like the same way we have made Earth our home, we're going to make the galaxy our home. And once we find access, let's say in 400 years, we have ships kind of moving around in an interstellar civilization. There is something present in human consciousness that looks at an existential phenomena and can consider it void and can consider it infinite. The vision I had, the inner vision that I would say would accompanies this talk, was that of a sort of kinda as if I felt as if the finger of a divine will, like a divine seer. So how would I say it? Like it's like how in the Bhagavad Gita they say if you follow a divine agency, let's say you're one of those spiritual people who's kind of like working with a personality behind the veil of thought or something. If you put your faith and devotion to an agency, to a divine agency, in the Bhagavad Gita it says in your afterlife that divine agency will take care of you. But if you realize that all divine agencies are standing upon one, that means you realize all the deities, for example, in the Vedic tradition, they had a sort of ultimate source, as if it's kind of Vedic mythology is very fascinating. It's kind of like organisms within organisms within organisms. Let me find this out. There's something they say like one day for Krishna is like trillions of years for us. It's a very interesting notion. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, I can't find it, but the minds of early human beings attempt to personalize the cosmos. This personalized relationship either was kept dormant in the inner realms or was externalized. The seed of intergalactic awareness has already been planted. The human psychology will move beyond individual, will move beyond linearized time. Time and space can experientially shift behind your eyes. In front of your eyes, you put in the colors of the world. That means it's as if your sensory perception takes in what's in your environment, yet what it does with the sensory perception, it's kind of like the sensory reception is the body, but the sensory processing, the processing of the senses into their unique formations and individualities, and kind of how the human being, its preferences move beyond the just the mere activity of its neurology. I feel that every era of history has had a demand, and it's kind of human beings have they. I feel the authentic relationship with one's legacy has been lost. Back in the day, technology wasn't that advanced. People, it was more evident that you were temporal here. You know, right now, me and you are standing in a civilization that is advanced, that has many technologies, language has developed, hierarchies have developed, many things have developed, and now we're sitting, and talking about, for example, the potentials of the mind. But we can see that back in the day, that it was as if they had less of the leisure, they had less of the luxury to contemplate. And not that they had less of the luxury, but life, its movements, I feel it's kind of like we have got our evolution is a crystallization of the behavior of a being in one dimension opening its eyes in a greater one. And that's how at least I see evolution. And when I say the seeds of intergalactic awareness has been planted, guys, sometimes it's I think every speaker, every advanced communicator, I consider 8 billion human beings all to be advanced communicators. I feel intelligence is not something to that you can really measure. It has to do with a sort of engagement with a dynamic experiential flow. So I'm kind of like that human being saying, all right, guys, with the dualism of language and the staticness of objective phenomena, yes, we're individuals, but the mind can experience states where the attention is present beyond dualism. When the attention is present beyond the dualism, what happens is the person tends to think that that's the like. Let me say it like this: the same state that yogis attain and the same state that how would I say it? Like I'm simply trying to communicate that beyond language, experience moves in ways where because it's beyond language, technically there's no owner. So what that means is you kind of like your attention becomes like wind. An intergalactic civilization, of course, is a suggestion of a communication between galaxies. And for me, then our neighboring galaxy is the Andromeda galaxy. And so I kind of felt as if like the Milky Way galaxy is like the younger brother of the Andromedan galaxy. Sometimes my mind's playful. I see, strange patterns. But and so with that mentality, it's as if we are reestablishing the communication of a galactic sector with another galactic sector playfully. You see, person observes something, they can perceive it with a bunch of angles. Once you're outside of a room, you can perceive kind of like the design of the house and the building and the structure and whatnot. It's right now in 2020, I think the way the mainstream perceives human existence is that it's like a projector that is run by energy, solar powered projector. That means it's like right now, what is the mind? It's a solar powered uh, processor of sensory data. And it's solar powered because we first need to have existence before experience. You see, it's the dichotomy, but at the same time, the singularity of the two. Right now, I could say my existence is not me, I'm this experiencer, and my attention is beyond the physical frame. And I do entertain that often, but ultimately, it's kind of like you can't keep your hand, as Rumi says, this poet, you cannot keep your hand in a fist or kind of stretch it out for two. What it means is it's better to have a fluid state of mind in this universe, in this plane of existence, rather than a static one. Because if you have too static of a mind, there's two implications. Either you're tired of seeing more, or you don't want to see more, or you're not willing. It's like there's a absence of responsibility. Anytime in my life, like I'll be honest, it's like no human being is of course perfect, but one can say that each human being harbors within them an ability to respond to the moment. Now that ability could be low, it could be less. The person could be overwhelmed by outer realms, so the person remains internal. The person can be overwhelmed by inner realms, the person becomes external. Sometimes it's like this distinction between the extrovert and the introvert is hilarious. Sometimes being that is an extrovert, the reason they're being an extrovert is because they're uncomfortable of the introversion, and the reason the person's being an introvert is they're uncomfortable with the extroversion. And what does that mean? That means it's as if we're jumping to the extremes of a cyclical realm, and the cycles are dualistic. We interpret cycles of nature dualistically. You know, spring in poetry is like a sign of life. Autumn in poetry is a sign of death. Winter, summer, winter. What I mean by that is there's a sort of interpretation of phenomenology through the presence of life. That means if I was to kind of like we see the planet has an axis, and if I was to playfully kind of consider the various dualities that human existence is found in, it's kind of like we don't have to just wonder about what is visible and invisible, but we have to. It's like the reason we care about visible manifest reality is because there is more to it. For me, this life, when I was younger, I felt I could contain it. I felt I knew it. I felt like it's like a person saying, I know everything. And the other person's, like the guy's friend is like, come on, man. It's like, you know everything, really? You know everything? You know? And you see, no, we know everything that we are exposed to. There's many things in this life that have remained mysteries that only few human beings have simply noticed this door, and they haven't even touched the doorknob, but they've noticed it. For me, it's like, what is the purpose of life? You know, and so we have to consider the life. What does that mean? The speed and the direction. And so the direction of people, if externality is satisfactory, will become internal. So it's like something strange is happening, and it's kind of increasing in a strange way as the future generations are going ahead. And it's kind of like their ability to respond is reducing, because it's like rather than the person who gets an external confrontation, like imagine someone pushes you externally, rather than you like externally confronting the situation. How many things in this life you have to engage with before they become animate? It's kind of like a Midas's touch scenario. Midas it was this character in mythology where this kid, everything he touched became gold. King Midas, he was this king that touched everything and it became gold. I mean, it's kind of like everything that finds itself in our attention gets access to how our subjectivity imbues it with meaning. So for me, it's kind of realizing this is why I had to create the realm language, the language threshold, because it is my roar against the nihilist. That means it's like sometimes I feel like I'm in certain battles of philosophy when I give these talks. These battles of philosophy are kind of seeing like what people have said before on the topic, and then kind of at the same time seeing what else can be said. Because perfection can be endless. I mean, why do you think Salvador Dali, this surreal painter, he says, "Don't fear perfection. You'll never reach it." And it's true because the more you advance, the more you see. Socrates understood, he said the only true wisdom is to know that you know nothing. Why would a man who knew so incredibly a lot for his time say that? Because he realized that the more you explore the forest, the bigger the forest is becoming. And sometimes this is the burden of knowledge. This is the burden of indoctrination, that you have to hold the world in certain shapes in your mind rather than realizing that sometimes in life you got to engage and then it becomes animate. My father would say something to me where when I was younger, very younger, it would irritate me, you know. He would, it's as if I would tasks and at the end of it he would this is me being like 14, something like that, like 14. And then my father would, that's the it's like he said, just, he would just say just do it, just do it. And I would try to articulate it in many ways, but my father would say just do the action, don't talk. You know, it's like that chore at hand or whatever, right? And he wasn't saying it in a dis. He would just say, "Just do it," you know, just do the act, you know. It took me years to realize the value of that sentence. Even though that sentence, "Just do it," I'm like, "Dad, is this a commercial?" But really, the idea behind it, one things you will never know until you engage. It's as if like you don't know who people are until you go talk to them. You know, you don't know who what a sort of philosophy is, for example, until you go see who the person was who came up with the philosophy and what era in history he lived, his eyes potentially perceived, and realizing even the various limits that you only see a tiny percentage. So for me, what it is that the past is lost. That means we may never know how Socrates meant what he said, but it is the task of the future generations that extract. So really we have to kind of bring in this pattern of responsibility. Some people say with great power, you know, it's like Uncle Ben, you know, told Spider-Man with Swami Uncle Ben. He pretty much told Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, and people feel that their mind perhaps tunes into the negative as a consequence of the object, you know, of the idea. But really, what it is that you will. How can I tell you? The more power you get, it doesn't mean it's easier. It just means the more you have to acknowledge. The more you see out of your world, you automatically care more from it. This is why I feel any human being, it doesn't matter if you have entered the educational system or not. I'm talking about your eyes. I'm talking about the eyes of what is standing here in this moment right now. Kind of asking human beings that, sure, when you look in the mirror, are you your reflection? So when you look in the mind, what do you notice? You notice thoughts. And could thoughts be the. For now, in our species, for our species in 2020, translates as language. Right now give birth to a geometrical language. So I'm that kind of person in kind of the history of this species, that I'm saying that light and sound act in a geometrical dimension, and that geometrical dimension holds within it very non-dualistic fields that generate the anime of a human being. So what it is we have a relationship excuse me, we have a relationship with ourselves as an object, but we also have a relationship with ourselves as subjects too. So it's as if you're not just an object moving in the void, you're a subject in the moving in the void. But now we realize that because the subject has free will, decision making is like it choosing what melody to play on the piano. And pretty much if life could be seen, by the way, anybody listening, please let me know if my voice is coming across. On my end, it's kind of showing connections and disconnections. So if my voice is cut off, please, I can see what I can do about it. But okay, so I think this is back. The situation is civilization is not at its sufficient capacity. Ultimately, it's these creatures planet that dictate the administration or the direction of the civilization. So either we have to attempt as a civilization to speak a new common language, a language that becomes a common denominator kind of in regards to our experience, more than just how we rock, a sort of new, a sort of vision that every human being finds that behind their eyes it is worth paying attention to. Imagine a civilization that is so advanced, the child that is born can't wait to enter the system. We're living in a civilization that people can't wait to get out of the system. Imagine a civilization where you can't wait to get in, where it's as if progress is has been under uttermost compassion. And so a world where nobody has an enemy because the one common enemy that mankind ever had was the unknown. And it's not that the unknown is an enemy, it's a negative force or has a negative connotation. The unknown is what is not known. And so, what is the ultimate quest for the known? What is the ultimate evolution? With consciousness, there, which is a sort of power for us as human beings, as creatures on this rock, compared to many other species, there comes mind, speech, and with mind there comes mortality. With speech comes the momentum and the vision of performance. So we can say mind and speech is like direction and speed. So you can say it's as if there's a strange um, parallel between and how the objectivity moves. That I was speaking about it in the talk before this one, that when we look at the psychology of the human being, we can't ignore the body. And when we, it's like, what is this? Heart is beating, eyes blink, air, there's inhalations, exhalations. Excuse me. I feel it's because of the light beams of the sun, um, as if this constant on and off switch effect, because our planet wanted to have a full body tan. So our psychology is kind of designed by room is off, room is on, light is off, light is on, light is on, conscious waking state, unconscious, like conscious waking state, dualistic creature. Why do you think we have two hands? What greater clue can the design of the universe give us that we have two hands and there is a symmetry to the design of the human body? So when you look at the life, it's weird because when you look at the branches of a tree, when you look at like the way weird ways they're curved, it's as if the ancient Greeks that there's no straight lines in nature. So how is it that there is no strange lines, but there's perfect symmetry in the human body and in the face of every? So it's as if you saw things from as if there was a vertical plane, that was like imagine kind of you were standing in the middle of the portal but sideways, so like the left part of your face is in one part of the portal and imagine the right is another part of the portal. So I'm speaking about a kind of plane like that in regards to the human being, and this plane is that there's an exact, so it's as if there's no, it's like everything is curved and kind of chaotic, but what the hell is this order that we're looking through? So you see, it's the coming into terms with the realization that there's not just a symmetry and geometry to physical existence, but that this geometry animates in the presence of the attention that allows existence to even be experienced. So sometimes if my eyes hadn't opened, who would there be to even consider a belief in God or not? So you see, after some point, the creature begins to become a creature. It's as if we start off. The first duality I feel that comes to the child is cold, like the temperature of the. It's like warmth and cold, So it's as if it's like temp. Believe it or not, I have this kind of theory that it's like hypothesis, I guess. Like it's temperature leads to emotional judgment. So if a person I don't know. Anyways, what I mean is that the child psychology is a sensitivity. It's behavior. Its interpretation of pain is hot and cold, comfortable, uncomfortable. When it becomes when it matures, this creature suddenly its pain becomes all the subjective landscapes that it. What you see is you see the limits of your inner realm, but at the same time, um, I don't know. It's as if everything that has conscious design tends to fit into other parts of the reality. This is a very strange thing to say. I'm saying this, please entertain it playfully, but I'm saying it's kind of like in front of our eyes, we are the creation of. It's like symmetry infused with duality leads to kind of the behavior of a new geometry. For me, sometimes I've listened to incredible music. The surgeon just naturally, in that moment was just like that. And in that moment, my mind stopped hearing the music. Every note evoked an emotion where within that emotion there was a sort of geometrical architecture. And I don't just think through language, it's think of it this way, all knowledge ever was different ways that certain. What I was trying to get to with this whole point of the dualistic psychology of this on and off kind of light hitting our planet and kind of the cyclical nature of things. Self as a container, it's like we're containing objective experience in subjective symbology. We think that subjective symbology is us, so we fight. There's violence on the planet. Isaac had this incredible quote where he said, Violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. The reason they call it the branches of knowledge is not only because they all come from the same trunk and have hidden roots in a soil beyond our sensory perception, but because the branches of knowledge endlessly can extend. So what that means, thing right now in our educational system about a field of any branch of knowledge, everything we as a species know about that branch of knowledge can extend. And what the educational system failed to inspire, I feel, in just children in general, is that it's not getting ready for a war. It is getting ready for a performance. So if life becomes a progression to one's greater ability, then we can say that's a good civilization is running. A system, imagine like the civilization can't wait for not to like this concept of control is so, it's like what can you really control? Alexander the Great, when he passed away, his hands were like his corpse was on a boat, hands were open, and many people were like, why was Alexander the Great's hands open? And he said because in his will he had said, let this be a sign to history that I came and I conquered and I attained the wealth of wealths. But even I left empty-handed. And so that's I think pure greatness, not just how you hold the sword and know when to use it, the weapon of the mind, the engagement of the attention, but it's also those moments when you know that you should put the sword down. So if you simply use this as a metaphor. Sometimes I feel the Big Bang Theory could be more crystallized, and it's as if existence was how a seed sprouted from the soil, and the appearance of the existence gives no clue to the seed that has now transformed and is being, because it's as if like it was a pool of energy. It was super hot there, as this explosion occurred came a sort of cooling, but this sort of cooling of something that began as an explosive effort, it's as if how was the cooling, how was so you see that it's like the of course it's kind of like we've skydived and it's taken us 4 billion years to get the ground, and now we've got we've got it on the ground, and we're kind of trying to uh, wonder about how the experience was and can be translated. I think it's a very valuable skill, and some people naturally have this, that they enjoy just the phenomena of experience. It's like for some people that has a value, for some people they don't. For some people their experiences of life doesn't have a value unless it's a certain thing they see or a certain thing they want. you know? It's like the breath of the human being, the phenomena of breathing. They are like inner ocean waves, or how can I say it? They're waves that move the elevation of a certain thought. I can tell you that when I inhale, the texture of my thought shifts than when I exhale. Exhales, I am very much more observant of the phenomena moving. You know, when I inhale, it's kind of like a reformatting way of how thought moves. So it's like we have advanced nature photographers taking pictures of mountain lions that are rare to find, and now Mr. Within is saying every person has now to become a photographer or an explorer, better yet, intelligence. We know nothing as a species. Because if we consider we know, we will be fools to how our future generation will see us as a pioneer. So that means every generation has to act like a pioneer and will be seen as a pioneer. You know, before our eyes were open, the eyes of others were open, and before the eyes of others closed, our eyes were open. And that's a kind of, I guess, an incredible beautification of the idea of civilization, that it is actually because we are natural beings, and when you look at nature and it's as if all abidance with a field, with the values of a field, it means we separated when we left the food chain and came into cities. We made the world the responsibility of only our intelligence. But when we were in the food chain, when we were still in the forests and jungles, our intelligence wasn't just our intelligence. It was the intelligence of the moment. It was the intelligence of the ecosystem. And so the thing is, man's ecosystem has become more his responsibility. And it's because before we had language and we were this sophisticated as creatures, it's like we had no, it's like the ecosystem was conducting us. So I kind of see it that even though there is the concept of birth, and I am grateful to exist incredibly, but the thing is, that I feel that I was born, but also the way I experience the self is that I awaken to it. When I say awaken, that means literally like how you wake up to something. Imagine waking up when it's like the only way you can wake up while you're awake is to see that you weren't fully awake. Imagine we had a situation where every person woke up in the morning and found in their hand a unique instrument. And this unique every person had a different instrument. And this instrument would be everywhere they would go. They would be able, as if it was always there with them. And so people eventually realize it's about playing the instrument. And so you kind of realize life is not per se only about purely its articulation, it's experience. And so when you become experientially sensitive, you automatically become existentially sensitive, and eventually life and through self-inquiry takes you into like that archetype pretty much has two choices. either attempt immortality or fade. If the archetype attempts immortality, it becomes more and more of a belief system. That means your inner realms care less about adjusting to the outer realms. But when your inner realms care to adjust for that to the outer realms, something strange happens. When man returns to a natural environment, his faults cease to exist. It's as if we were to return to nature as human beings, establish a completely new, imagine those are thinking about nature as an interface, and we totally forget the way this interface is, and we create a new interface. That means we consciously direct the patterns. It's like, how can I say it? The world has become more and more our responsibility, and that's the whole point of the free will. And so this responsibility has become immense, and it's as if you can totally see why certain people in the world, they can be stressed out, because when they really look at the large picture, there is no value to the existence, you know. But when you look at the shorter picture, it's as if every moment is an eternal one. It's as if man may forget, but the world does not. The universal sector remembers what happens. You know, if there's 0.001, whatever amount of 0.001% chance that that the world, this whole universe is alive, as if me and you are inside this organism, then how we conduct ourselves is only a value to us. And what it is I've realized, okay, what is the choice? Individual ego or what? Collective ego. What is the collective ego? It is actually the evolution of the individual. It's when you suddenly realize you have a worth by the nature of your design and the momentary your eyes are open in. And it's as if, what world are you daring to live for? Because there, we can say every person has a unique opening of vision to the world, which means that every person has, in some sense, a certain viewpoint of the world, which ultimately means they have classified the world into values differently than how others have. So, in all these complex ways that the minds of human beings are classifying and articulating the realm, what is the overall value? And it is to immediately establish a civilization that acknowledges the greatest resource on this in existence is the mind. And so suddenly the educational system is like, oh my God, a lot of our knowledge has been disconnected from the actual experiences. So how do we bring back authentic experience to a kind of unauthentic mechanical educational system? The action is that for the first time, it's as if the classroom has to have two. And what these phases would be is that every teacher, I feel this should be, this is an incredible thing to implement in educational systems. So what is the model? The model is one teacher, bunch of students, and a lesson is shared. Okay, this is the traditional model. The students go sit quietly, the lesson is shared. Now, I notice something. When the teacher is speaking, all the students, their minds are not just like doing nothing. Their minds are hearing whatever the teacher is saying, listening to it, and it all has to do with how their minds animate, which suggests how much they will care for the teacher. So I thought of this mentality. It's as if, why don't we have all classes in the educational system be divided between a sort of exchange of the contents of the minds of the students and the teachers. So it's as if, strangely, you would see, like, this is a very out of the blue kind of metaphor, but you would see, for example, in certain fantasy writings, a wizardry school. And in this wizardry school, there was a sort of, how would I say it? Like, pretty much, I feel the inner realms of all the students that enter the educational system must have a contribution and must have a value. And pretty much all these politicians we see come and talk about getting children off the streets, getting violence, rid of violence. Well, it's as if when you wonder why many people are acting violently in the street, it's pretty much resource allocation. So it's very fair and common sense to say somebody who hasn't had something, and has really wanted it, automatically will feel as if they have a right to take it. You know, human psychology. I think it's like kind of a complex symphony, and you're like taking the notes that Mozart had written on Beethoven and wrote on paper, and you're like, what is this? Pretty much the biggest thing that I would say, like, that happens is that the educational system, this is what I was saying, that the way to get the children off the streets is that if it's money, they're after the assignments and everything in the educational system where the child feels their contribution has a value. I was thinking, okay, this may not be the best perfect educational system, but it's an early attempt. It's a prototype I'm sharing. But I would see this prototype as, all right, I guess I've taken the talk to a direction where I got to share some ideas I haven't shared before. Um, in the attempt about the ideal way that education can move in the veins of civilization, is that it doesn't make sense to have ways that DNA has spiraled all spiral into the same. What I mean is that the educational system is, it seems to be a tactic back in the day. It seems to have the roots of its design during times of war, where it's as if it was a way of kind of scouting for efficient soldiers to defend the nation. So we can have like the soldiers had to memorize in one bunker the information and run to another bunker and immediately explain the whole situation. And so it's as if they're accurate to the war effort. So an educational system has developed where it is just challenging the mind of its students in a certain way, and the student doesn't even feel that its true opinions on the subject matter will ever reach the ears of a sort of higher community. I feel that right now people are going educational system. An advanced educational system of advanced civilization will be going towards the people. When we care for the human mind, we care for its potential. And what the potentials of the mind can become are probabilities that are like the greatest inventions that have animated in this world. I had this idea that the educational system, in every year of graduation, every plant a tree. You cannot graduate into the next grade without planting a tree. Pretty much, I feel every child in the educational system must start. And the next thing is, especially for countries that there is, for example, an obesity problem. What you do is that we want to handle an energy problem and we want to handle a health issue of the students that are in the educational system. Imagine the stairs Imagine an educational system where the children had to walk a lot of stairs. I know it sounds kind of, why not just have flat halls? But imagine it would there were stairs you had to walk. And so imagine these stairs were not normal stairs. They were stairs that with every step of the student on the stairs, it generates the energy required to maintain the whole building. So we pretty much solve a health issue by students having to walk a lot of stairs, and at the same time, the energy of the whole building is being generated by the building. That's when you can say that's an intelligent building, where it becomes pretty much like a ship. I think that's really ultimately how like advanced society would be, one where it's as if like instead of kind of like um, having charities, imagine charities become obsolete. City is intelligent enough to lift off into the air when there's a natural disaster. Anyways, these are just personal views I'm sharing. Hopefully, you listen with kind ears. Honestly, feel like probably what I've been saying in this talk has been disconnected a couple times. But what can I say? There's no teacher and there's no student. Every person lure of the existential design they find themselves in. We have inner realms that are remaining dormant, and many human beings are living. Their eyes open and they're born, and they pass away. And before they pass away, it's as if how much of the inner realms were shared. Now, what that means is any technology, that this is the idea. Your attention has to be on the technology for you to use it. I'll also give you a perfect example of how the technology of language, sometimes the attention away from language can shift one's nature. So this story is a yogic story. It's about, and what we find is there's this man who goes to this enlightened guy, and he sees the enlightened guy is meditating beside like this cow. What do you call it? Like some sort of cat. So the guy's meditating early in the morning there, and this man who was kind of curious, it's as if like back in the day when you got bored, what would you do? You would try, kind of go to the town, and you see everybody wants to get enlightened in that kind of society. So in Vedic times, enlightenment was a big thing. Find an ultimate state that was a resolution to all the suffering and pain and the meaninglessness of life was a sort of fascinating thing for people. I feel then and now. But anyways, this guy goes sees this guru. He goes up to the guru and he's like, "Hey man, you know what I'm here for? Enlighten me." The guy says to the guru, "Please tell me what this enlightenment is." The man says, the guru says, stands from his meditation and says, "You want to get enlightened? This is what you must do," as if the logos has spoken to him, you know, as if he's received a command from his inner realms. And so he stands up and says to this man, "You have to take these 400 cows, and you got to take him to the mountains. There's a place." And he tells the guy the place, and he says, "When you go there, when there are 1,000, you come back, and I'll tell you, I'll tell you then." And this guy's like, "Whoa." This guy's like, okay, if it's kind of a strange situation because in one angle he's like, can I trust this guy? On another angle he's like, if I like this guy definitely trusts me if he's giving me 400 cows, you know. So, so he trusts the guy. He's like, okay, all right, this is how life's going forward here in this moment. And so he decides to, sincerely try it out. He decides to respect the voice before disrespecting it. So what happens is the man finds himself every day, with this sheep, and he just finds this like rock that's there, and he sits on this rock. And I don't know, he sits on somewhere. I don't think you can sit too long on a rock, but let's say he's sitting on the grass or somewhere. He's just sitting. He's sitting there beside the sheep, and the days are going by, and it's a very nice place, and there seems to be no wolves around ever. And so he's just there sitting, and he's counting the sheep every day, every day, every day, until he gets tired. And as he's just sitting there, so much time passes on, as the story goes, that he forgets why he was there. He doesn't. He stops counting, and suddenly it's as if a new kind of world is moving his mind, and he's finding an inner abidance with the nature of the external realm. And so this man suddenly, he's just there. And he attains Satchitananda, which means he suddenly becomes conscious how existence is bliss because of its miraculous value. Suddenly, one of the cows comes to the guy, and the guy's just sitting there in bliss. That means if you probably ask that guy, "Who are you?" the closest thing he could say is the eyes of nature. But anyways, the cow comes and tells him, "Yo, man, we're 1,000. We gotta go. Let's go back." The guy suddenly remembers why he was there, you know, and goes to count the sheep. And when he goes to count the sheep, he suddenly remembers how to count, like you know, the numerical language. And what he does is then he's going, then he's just going. And what happens is suddenly he has forgotten the way back. And then the wind and the birds tell him where to go. And he goes back, and it's coincidentally like the same kind of time that he left with the sheep, and the guru's there sitting in meditation, as if waiting for this guy. And kind of like in Lord of the Rings 2, when Gandalf is kind of returning with the army behind him or something, this guy is returning with an army of like, you know, cows behind him, or sheep or whatever. Cows, I think I said. Yeah. So he goes back and he sees the guru, and the cows automatically, as if they know what to do, they go into the um, fenced area. And so the guy suddenly remembers, but he's still as if in that bliss of nature. And in that moment, he looks at the guy and he's like, "All right, your cows are 1,000. Tell me, what is this enlightenment?" But his voice and tone and presence is totally different, this guy. And the guru looks at him and says, "You already know it." And what that meant is sometimes externally, yes, it's expression oriented, our intelligence, but internally it's observance oriented. And that observance is an attributeless instant. So that's the thing. That's why I created to develop the term the language threshold. That sometimes there's a vanishing point to how far language can capture experience. Language vanishes and then experience continues. So, anyways, guys, I think it is fair to say that we can start as a civilization, as a species, confronting different sectors to the outer realm and the inner realm. The sectors of the outer realm by early astronomy have been given a kind of, by early astronomers has been given an outline, a geometrical kind of existence. But every system of design can update. And what that means is when the person has to wonder, okay, a design is here, do I allow to stay here, or do I realize every moment that my attention is still on this design, it is in some sense, how can I tell you? When every moment that my attention is on this design, it's as if it could have been on a new design. So it's as if like your attention is choosing to keep past patterns and thought structures alive or new ones. And so I've realized that that sort of a sort of relationship with one's self, where the character in that story is inseparable from the world, the setting of that story, and inseparability of all phenomena, including yourself in your attention. We have to create a futuristic civilization, just like the yin yang symbol, and a sort of natural civilization, and have the dot in each side. What that means is we develop a chaotic civilization, which has an ordered core, and an ordered civilization that has a chaotic core. And we have a symbiosis of two types of civilization. Simply as we find, like the psychology of the human being is dualistic, we have, in some sense, a civilization that acknowledges its shadow. And so, as Carl Jung said, it's like the whole point of the shadow is like some things you're seeing that are you're unconscious of, but you're aware you're unconscious. So what can you do? You just make it conscious, you know. And the movement of attention is consciousness, really. So, anyways, guys, I feel the fractal-like nature of thought suggests that the void can become infinite at any moment, and the infinite can become void in any moment. Ultimately, meaning that in a dimension beyond those definitions, there is that something that is navigating, that is moving. The prime mover of our intelligence, we of course describe it to the objective self, the body, the biological body. But when we come to ascribe a subjective self to it, the weather of your inner realms changes much quicker than the outer. That means a person in the day, like their body may have has way less transformations, you can say, compared to their sense of self. That's subjective. Their egoic constructs. And pretty much, though, I like how Alan Watts kind of had a simple approach to that ego, and it's really true because it's really attention to the self of that moment. So when you treat yourself as one kind of being, you become ignorant to how in different moments and states of mind, the whole interpretation of your reality is different. So this was the key thing about mindfulness, that ultimately one of the greatest things that the human being can do is not bang the door shut. You know, it's to allow your mind to see value, and then authentically, when that trust of the value of your experience is there, the presence becomes comfortable with the unknown. So the unknown is actually moving all knowledge prior to even knowledge thinking it's moving the unknown into a definition. So I don't know, guys. I felt these ideas were crucial to share, and of a greater civilization, we either attempt it or we don't. But the cool thing is, what if we attempt it just to see what it looks like? That's my thing. I mean, it's like forget the failure. It's like, so what? Failure is inevitable, but it's like the success though. Success is not that's the thing. The success of your civilization does not just purely rely on the success of the individual, because if we had just only the success of the individual, then this beast modality would happen. It's as if we left the jungles, we came and lived in cities, but we're still have the sort of morality of creatures on the street. And what I mean by this is not that we haven't developed the elegance and sophisticated ways that we acknowledge the human being, but I'm just saying that there is a sort of level of savageness that allows the cruelty to be easy. And that savageness is kind of like the person is like acting cruel and making the world a cruel place, or the person, in some sense, how can I tell you? There's a kind of unique relationship, kind of game theory like relationship one can see in this. Um, it's kind of like four possibilities. The self is good, the world is bad, the world is good, the self is bad. The self is good, the world is good, the self is bad, the world is bad. In the dualistic dimension, I feel this kind of framework occurs. And so, really, when the world is, we have the dystopic kind of outcome, we have the utopic outcome, and then we have a sort of kind of how in, like, I don't know, like in mathematics and topology, they speak about ordered pairs and how it's like the link of two points of this shape where it's important which point came first in the set, you know. So it's as if we're choosing, did we come first or the world? If we choose purely objectively that the world came here first, we will appear to ourselves as the hallucination of electrons, of a meaningless atomic reality is just everything. But really, what that atomic reality is the establishing of some sort of geometrical vibratory activity. That means ultimately it's as if the scientist is testing on the living or is testing on the animate or the inanimate. Now, how the animate moves, because we have inner realms, means that the way something happens outside, we don't first exactly the way it happened. We see how far our vision had an access to comprehending the moment. So when just the person realizing that there's more to their sight than will ever meet their eyes. That mindfulness brings forth rhythms of innovation. That means, think of it this way: life is complex. Okay, how do you handle it? Well, guess what? The root of all complexity is simplicity. So when we realize that if you in your life can maneuver and navigate simple experiences, then eventually there will be complexity will never exist because the simple is just moving in new ways, you know. So it's kind of having an ability to um, be without doing anything and doing things without being anything. I think this has parallels towards the core of Tai Chi, but I don't know, maybe. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I will end the talk here, but I chose that picture because I feel we have to start wondering about not just, you know, the sky, that we can move beyond. It's as if it's like, whoa, existential reality is so vast, but then you see there's the inner realms, and so life is infinite, um, visibly and invisibly. And that means that there's so much, the mystery is just unraveling. The mystery is becoming greater and greater. That means an advanced civilization is not just it has the perfect answer and it's implementing it. No, it's that in every answer to every problem of the past and every new answer to every problem to the past, there establishes a new reference point. So what it is we are referring the self to the world. But to perceive it as the world referring to the self would be inconceivable as an individual being. So the same way we exist and we can't see, for example, we can't fathom non-existence. It's kind of like the same way where Okay, the same way that a being that exists can't fathom non-existence, pure non-existence, it's like a creature that thinks it's an individual cannot fathom a pure collective vision. And that means that at some point, the ideological mechanism has to stop and just nature is there. The navigation of that speed is just through a simple acknowledgement of how the moment is there. And so, what I mean by all this is that we must navigate our attention because that's what an advanced civilization deserves. The evolution of selfish individual consciousness to selfless collective vision. We start living for not just our own minds, but the mind of our civilization that is, you know, the great voice that will move all generations. So, anyways, thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings and namaste.